Hi, it's Dwyer, gamblersadvisory.com, a free site, bettingangle.us, a free site. It is Monday morning. It's the Monday after Big Baby Jared Anderson's destruction of George Arias. Let's talk about it. But first, remember, the opinion you should follow should be your own. Just consider this video to be a second opinion from a complete stranger online. Now, for me, personally, the top fight of the weekend was the Jared Anderson fight. Why? Because life is unfair. Because, right or wrong, the heavyweight division is the top division in boxing. That's the glamour division. The average man on the street knows at least one heavyweight champ, knows at least two or three heavyweight contenders. Right now, there's a lot of talent out there. I'm just telling you, there's the heavyweight champ, and then there's everyone else, right? The only other position in the world of sports, as I see it, that's on par with being heavyweight champ is the world's fastest man. Well, you saw a tall fighter, right? Tall fighter, Sebastian Fundora, a guy who gave away his height, get caught, right? Had his chin out there to get hit, got caught and got stopped. My question to you is whether Fundora's style was the right style, whether it was a style that was going to age well, right? I would argue that it wasn't, right? With regard to Big Baby, what I want Baby to do, and I was very impressed with the performance, but understand, school never ends. The work is just starting. What I want Big Baby to do, and I'm serious about this, NBA season just ended, is I want him to look through the stats of two players, right? The first is a guy who no one talked about as being an MVP this year. No one, right? We kept hearing about Joker. We kept hearing about Joel Embiid, right? No one talked about this guy. And understand, this guy is often confused with Klay Thompson, right? We always talk about the Splash Brothers, and we always try to equate Klay with the guy I'm talking about, Steph Curry. Now, you understand, for shooters, the holy grail in basketball is to be 40, 50, 90, right? 40 from three, 50 from the field, 90% from the free throw line. No one's talking about it, folks. This year, Steph Curry hit more than 40% of his threes, hit 49%, not 50, but 49% from the field, and hit more than 90% of his free throws, while averaging 29.4 points per game. Now, for all of that, the great shooting that he exemplifies, right? The points per game. Understand, Curry, at least 2 scoring titles. For all of that mastery, it's at the margins where you see the difference. Steph Curry this year averaged more than 6 assists a game, right? He's 6'2". He averaged more than 6 boards a game, right? Folks, Klay Thompson can't match the 6 and 6. In fact, very few people in the league can match the 6 and 6. No one talks about Curry's assist numbers or his rebounding. That's why he's great, because he's paying attention to stuff like that, right? How about James Harden, the other guy I'm going to mention? This is the guy who 1 year averaged over 36 points a game, and they gave the MVP to someone else. I'm not making this up, right? This is a guy who, like Curry, has won at least two scoring titles, right? At least two. Just understand, while people were asking the question of whether Embiid was the MVP of the league, I'm just telling you the question should have been asked whether Joel Embiid was the MVP of his team. Because James Harden this year led the league in assists, 10.7 a game. Right? It's that attention to detail that makes greatness. Scoring champs doing other stuff that other players aren't doing. So now we get to Jared Anderson. Now let's talk about what impressed me. I was impressed by a lot. But Jared Anderson, who has one of the heavyweight division's most explosive straight right hands. Folks, it's explosive. It's really a right cross. Right? Just understand that he comes out in this fight and he's shooting a jab. Right? My advice to this young fighter is never lose the jab. Never. Right? Jared Anderson has something like 14 or 15 knockouts. I'm not sure. I want Jared to realize that one of the great jabbers in history, Larry Holmes, had 44 knockouts. I'm just telling you that that jab sets up so much. You want to be able to come out, you want to play your game, right? That jab gives you tempo. That jab gives you volume. In other words, you're fighting another big slugger. If you're the one landing the jab, you're the one winning the round. That jab also, as it did in this fight, is going to keep an opponent on his heels. Is going to dissuade that opponent from trying to set up shop in the pocket. Right? That opponent's going to be away from you. Right? Let me throw in a wrinkle here. And I would encourage Jared Anderson to use the net, to look up interviews. Larry Holmes talked about how he liked to throw the jab from his waist. I'm not kidding. Because an opponent couldn't figure out the angle of it. And it also gave Larry a chance to rest his hands. Right? Jared Anderson, who has a pretty good jab, can now play games with it. Right? Change the angle a little bit. Keep the opponent guessing. But what I want Jared Anderson to also realize is that George Arias had a left hook timed, didn't he? In other words, while Jared Anderson is throwing his left jab, George Arias was timing it, then was jumping in and throwing right hands up on Jared Anderson. Right? Anderson needs to think defensively. As you're throwing the jab, have a hand here to block whatever is coming back. Right? Arias, I was impressed by him. Right? Arias could lunge and throw that left. What he didn't do was use that opportunity to get out of the pocket. Right? I'm sure he's going to look at the film and realize he should have thrown the left, then he should have moved left to get away from Jared Anderson. Let me say this too on Jared Anderson. Online, look at a couple of champs, both trained by Emmanuel Stewart, who had the heavyweight belt for years, because that's where you want to be. Guys who had great jabs, Lennox Lewis and Vladimir Klitschko. Right? Jared needs to keep pumping the jab like he did in this fight And he also wants to think about a lean, right? This sounds trivial, folks. I'm telling you, there are fewer things to me that are more major. He's a tall guy, unlike Sebastian Fundora, who's leaning forward, making himself vulnerable. You saw how that ended for him, right? A young guy who thought he was going to be young forever, who thought he could lean forward and rely on high volume. What you want to do is give yourself a bigger margin of error. You want to lean backward. You're 6'4". You want to be 6'4" in the ring, right? Look at Lewis, right? You're leaning back. You're working on your center of gravity now while you're young, while you're in your early 20s, right? You want to lean back. Ali used to lean back. You want to shoot the jab so the opponent has a harder time finding you. So when that opponent has a left hook timed, a left counter hook timed, and he leaps forward to hit you with that left hook, you're leaning back, and you can just, by reflex, lean back a little bit more and take the sting out the punch. Roll with the punch. Have it miss you. Right? So if I'm Jared Anderson, I work on the lean. Right? I'm telling you, folks, he's, let's just say you see things falling in place for him. Right? A lot of the guys at heavy, as we know, are tall guys. Right? Joe Joyce, Deontay Wilder, Tyson Fury, they're tall. Right? Against tall opposition like this, with this jab that Jared Anderson has, that lean could really help him. Right now, George Foreman didn't need the lean because George Foreman was defensively blessed. Right? If Jared Anderson really wants to be adventurous, study George Foreman's defense. Right? Figure out how you could shoot a jab and how you could then have arms between your opponent and you. Right here again, he can come out like Sebastian Fundora did and rely on volume and aggressiveness, and Jared Anderson is aggressive. He wants to fight you and can rely on his primary weapons. But I'm just telling you the difference between guys like that and Steph Curry is that Steph Curry, while he is killing you from three, right? And we're talking about a guy who, I believe he's the only man in NBA history to hit more than 400 threes in a season, right? While he has that going on, the brother's getting 6 boards. The brother's getting 6 assists. The brother's doing things that Klay Thompson can't do, that most of the guys in this league can't do. That's what Jared Anderson needs to do. Right? Even if he comes out and he feels he can knock the other guy out in 1 or 2 rounds, he needs to realize that he needs to work on developing and keeping great habits. So let's talk about the early knockout. And I don't blame him here. Right? The other guy quit, Jared Anderson, by the way, his solution, and it's a jaw dropper, his solution to getting timed and hit with Arias' counter left hook was to go southpaw himself. Right? Tremendous. That's how the fight ends, by the way. Jared Anderson starts opening up as a southpaw. Here again, just like Steph Curry would. Just like Greg Maddux, the best pitcher I've seen in baseball, would work on his defense, right? Look at the number of gold gloves Greg Maddux won. This is one of the dominant pitchers, right? The pitching wasn't enough. He needed to learn how to hop off the mound and help his cause by being the best defensive pitcher in the game, right? Those are the things that Jared Anderson needs to work on. So, understand, in this hard hitting, slugger heavyweight division, one of the premier sluggers of our time, Deontay Wilder, had to go the distance in that first Tyson Fury fight. In other words, whatever the great KO percentage Deontay Wilder had, however many first and second round KOs Deontay Wilder has had, just understand Deontay Wilder was ready and did go the distance against Tyson Fury, right? And still had power in that last round. In other words, he's not just barely making it the distance. No, he's dropping Fury in the 12th round, right? I need for Jared Anderson to understand that Tyson Fury was forced to go the distance with Otto Wallin, right? That's today's heavyweight division. Now, I've read where Jared Anderson thinks that he's ready for the best, right? That his time has come. And I know he's looking at the calendar and he's thinking, man, when Ali was my age, he was heavyweight champ. When Mike Tyson was my age, he was heavyweight champ. Right? What I want Jared Anderson to think about, especially since Zhang Zhili just went the distance with Filip Ergovic, is, does this 3-round fight against George Arias mean that he's ready to go the back half of the fight when needed against the Filip Ergovic, against the Zhang Zhili, a guy whose stamina is a little bit questionable, but yet, while we're calling it a little bit questionable, Zhili does go the distance against Filip Ergovic. That's after the Jerry Forrest disaster. Right, so let me just say this, and I know it's about winning. I know these young guys come in and they say, man, I can blow this dude out. Why am I hesitant about it? If I can send everyone here home early, why wouldn't I want to do it? It's because you don't want to be Sebastian Fundora, right? A guy who's blood and guts, he's in there throwing a lot of punches. He's not working on the mastery that gets you 6 assists and 6 boards when you're 6'2", a shooter who is going 40, 49, 90 from the field, right? Let me just say this too, and I'm serious as a heart attack here. In the 80s, we didn't know what 40, 50, 90 was. Right? No one was walking around saying 40, 50, 90, right? We didn't know. What we know today is that a guy named Larry Joe Bird did 40, 50, 90 twice. And understand, Larry Bird, while he's shooting out the lights, arguably the best shooter of the era, right? There are very few guys in the conversation. Chris Mullin, I guess, is in the conversation. But understand, while Larry Bird was going 40, 50, 90, right? Forward back then, shooting threes. Think about that, right? When guys were hardly shooting threes back then. Understand that Larry, for his career, was averaging 10 boards a game. And this is the Patrick Ewing era. This is the Olajuwon era. This is the Rick Mahorn era, right? In the 80s, under the board, that was hazardous. This is the Bill Laimbeer era, right? You're under the boards. Being under the basket was not for pretty boys, right? Understand, for Larry Bird, being 40, 50, 90 wasn't enough, right? Larry averaged 10 boards a game. Larry even made some all-defensive teams. Just food for thought. So Jared Anderson, I'll just say this. Like Larry Holmes, right? And understand, Larry Holmes would riddle you with this jab. I mean, riddle you. And then he'd understand it was just a matter of time before he got the KO. Right? Look at the Larry Holmes, Jerry Cooney fight. Cooney, great left hook. Larry knew it. Larry had that blocked. Larry's not in a rush in that fight. Larry's letting the fight come to him. Great jab. He's not going to give up that jab. He's not going to give up his height. Let me say this too to Jared Anderson, and I'll close with this. And I know I'm nitpicking here. Why? Because Jared Anderson is talented, because he's close, because he has an opportunity that most people don't have. Look at the two heavyweight champs. Right? Tyson Fury, the guy who's ducking Alexander Usyk, the other one. Right? Just understand, both of those guys have jabs. Both of them have mobile jabs. Now, we're getting advanced here, right? Larry Holmes had a mobile jab. By a mobile jab, I mean a jab where the guy's not tethered to the pocket. This isn't a Lyndon Arthur jab. Look up that light heavyweight, where the guy has a great jab, but he's tethered to the pocket. No, this is a jab where guys are picking up their feet, right? Look at Tyson Fury when he wins the heavyweight title over Vladimir Klitschko. Vladimir Klitschko has a great stationary jab, but there's a gap, right? A guy with a mobile jab, Ali, right, just has more going on than a guy with a stationary jab. Liston had a great jab, by the way, but Liston's was stationary, right? If I'm Jared Anderson, Jared, you have the jab working for you. Pull up the films of Larry Holmes. We're just talking champions. Larry Holmes, Tyson Fury, Alexander Usyk. That's where you want to be. Right? Those guys had the lean. They could lean back. Those guys could pick up their feet and move when they threw stiff jabs. Right? If I'm Jared Anderson, it's the little things that I'm going to work on. Right? So as great as that right hand is, and it's spectacular, it is spectacular. Right? Just like Steph Curry's shooting range. You need to work on getting under the glass and getting boards. Right? If a 6'2" guy who's averaging over 29 points a game, is his team's lead scorer, right, can get 6 boards a game, right, in a year where he's not even in the MVP conversation. That's the kind of high standard, with 6 assists, that's the kind of high standard Anderson needs to set for himself. The great ones are always playing against themselves. They're trying to meet their own standards, right? Jordan's points per game didn't drop to 22 when he was up against scrubs. No, the guy had a standard. The guy was going to get to his numbers. He was going to play his defense, right? He was going to do it his way, regardless of the opposition. So let me just say, I was impressed with Jared Anderson's performance. I was impressed with George Arias, right? Arias, if Arias thought about staying low, right, moving a little bit to get out of the way of Jared Anderson having him pinned up against the ropes. And if Arias just focused a little bit more on ring placement, right, keep it in the middle of the ring, right? Wait this guy out. Understand, Jared Anderson simply doesn't have a lot of experience going deep in fights. If you're fighting a Jared Anderson, you need to say, okay, this brother's going to be explosive the first 3 rounds. I want to see him in round 7 and round 8. I want to have some gas left in my tank for those rounds. Right? Then Arias, who to me has hand speed, has timing, right, comes up on Jared Anderson a couple of times. I think Arias could do even more than that. As for Jared Anderson, player, you're in a rare spot where you can look at films of the greats and you can say to yourself, you know what? I have the jab. I'm going to use the jab. Right? I don't need to take chances early because this jab is getting me rounds. Understand what that jab does. It wins rounds for you. Right? The greats understand that they don't have to be blood and guts. They don't have to be getting hit if they're winning the rounds behind a great jab. Force the other guy to have to figure out how to get by your jab. You don't have to force the issue. Then if you're like Larry Holmes, and again, count his number of KOs, there's going to be a time in the fight where the guard is so busted up, you could then start throwing left hooks instead of the jab. The guy will be so finished. Look at how finished Jerry Cooney is. Falling over himself at the end of the Holmes fight. The guy's going to be so finished that getting the knockout will be like crossing the street. You've done the work. The other guy is battered. You're already far ahead on the judges' scorecards. The other guy realizes he can't even hit you with his best punch because that jab's just been bludgeoning him. Right? Jared Anderson is someone to watch. I believe he's 23 years old. Let's just say, in terms of American boxers, right? You saw Jermaine Franklin just take Anthony Joshua the distance, right? The only American boxer right now who seems to be ahead of Jared Anderson on the pecking order at heavyweight would be the former heavyweight champion, 5-year heavyweight champion, Deontay Wilder, right? Obviously, Jared Anderson needs to get in rounds, right, in a sport where even Deontay Wilder has been stretched the distance, right, where Philly Bergovic just got stretched the distance, right? Obviously, the people behind Jared Anderson need to think about what happens after round 5, right? So you want him to get that confidence and stuff like that. But Jared, the jab was excellent. Don't fall in love with your right hand, right? Throw that jab. Set things up. Look at the greats. Get the lean. Roll a little bit better with the, with that leaping left hook that Arias was throwing. Just look at the film and roll a little bit better with that. Let me say this too. Floyd Mayweather had an excellent, and I mean excellent, lead left hook that he would throw. That jab is going to give you the opportunity to start throwing lead left hooks. Take advantage of it, right? I encourage boxing fans to look at Jared Anderson, folks. That's what part of the future of boxing looks like, right? These young guys like Sebastian Fundora make mistakes in just trying to go blood and guts and not thinking about technique. If you have height, learn how to use it. Learn how to win slow rounds. Throw the jab. Figure out the defensive needs. Jared Anderson seems to be doing all that. I thought Anderson looked better in this fight than he did the Jerry Forrest fight. And obviously that Jerry Forrest fight, he was extremely successful. Another early KO. Right here, he showed some patience. Right? Please, keep doing that. That's how I see it. Let me hear from you. I hope you leave your comments in the comment section of this YouTube video. And if there are other extremely promising American heavyweights, tell us about it in the comment section of this YouTube video. Thanks for stopping by.